Hi, I'm Luke Chow from the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis in Toronto, Canada. If you're watching this video, it's probably because you're looking at doing hypnotherapy with me, and the purpose of the video is to help you make an informed decision about proceeding. This video is intended to be a short, concise summary covering the most common questions that people have about hypnosis. At the end of this video consultation, you should be able to make an informed decision about proceeding with hypnosis. Only you can decide whether or not hypnosis is right for you. It's your spending, it's your mind, it's your life, it's your time that we're working with, and you are the best person to decide whether hypnosis is right for you. All I can do is give you the best and most accurate, most complete information that I can to allow you to make an informed decision, but ultimately the decision is up to you. So people typically choose hypnosis because they know exactly what they want, but they feel out of control. A metaphor that comes from, I believe, William James, and I've also heard it credited to Buddha. The metaphor is that the conscious mind is like a rider sitting on a horse, where the conscious mind is holding the reins, looking ahead, making decisions, thinking that she's in control. But if the horse you're riding on is bolting off or spooked or disobedient, then the horse will really have all the power in that dynamic. And often people find themselves in a relationship with their feelings, with their body, with their habits, such that they're looking ahead and wanting something, and yet the metaphorical horse that they're riding on refuses to budge or is going in a completely different direction. That's where a hypnotherapist can come in to help. One other way to see what a hypnotist does is that a hypnotist is kind of like a taxi driver, in that it's not up to us to say what your problem is, and it's not up to us to say where you're starting from. We'll listen to you talk about your problem. We'll also listen to you talk about your ideal goals and your ideal life and your ideal habits, your ideal outcome, and our job is to navigate from point A to point B. We're almost mercenary in that regard, in that we'll let you choose your path for your life under the idea that you are the best person to make your decisions for you. Sometimes we'll get requests that are implausible, or requests that in the bigger picture could be more harmful than helpful to the client. Like, for example, we get requests to repress memories. We get requests to forget an ex, for example, which in the long run is more harmful than helpful. So sometimes we will provide our input if we believe that what you're asking for is not the best way forward, but still, generally, you know where you're going. Generally, you know what's wrong with your life, and a hypnotist steps in to get you from point A to point B. So there are a few situations where hypnosis might not be right for you. The first is that if you have a psychotic disorder, especially if it's not being treated, hypnotherapy would not be recommended in that situation. As part of this video series, there is an assessment you can do at home to assess how suggestible you are. And people who are not very high on the suggestibility scale, in fact, people who we would deem low in suggestibility, might look at other options first before considering hypnosis. If you believe that hypnosis is a magic cure that fixes your problems without any thought or participation from you, then hypnosis is not right for you. The reality is the relationship between the hypnotist and the client is more like a teacher and a student, where there's interaction and the student is an active participant, rather than like a surgeon and a patient, where the patient is not an active participant and instead the surgeon is literally operating on the patient. Hypnosis will not work on someone who's being compelled to be hypnotized. You have to be willing to first show up into our office and to follow the instructions, and you have to be an active, willing, ideally enthusiastic participant in the process for hypnosis to work for you. We've included this question about success rate because it's a question that comes up quite a lot, and people who ask the question are usually expecting to hear one number. They're expecting to hear 60%, 80%, 90%. And the problem with quoting one number without also describing the methodology is that it's very easy to lie with statistics. And I don't want a statistically valid number that I'm going to give to you to be compared with a statistically invalid number provided by a competitor. So to make a long story short, the success rate depends not only on the skill of the hypnotist, the success rate also depends on how selective the hypnotist is with who he works with. The success rate depends on how long after the session you measure success. So, for example, someone right after a session will not want to have a cigarette or participate in bad habits almost all the time. But then a few days later, a week later, a month later, a year later, the success rate goes down over time, universally for every hypnotherapist. The success rate also depends on how you measure success. So, for example, if someone comes in with a fear of public speaking, for some clients, success is just any impact at all on their fear. For other people, success only matters when there's a complete lack of fear or worry or doubt whatsoever. Any single number that I quote without a consistent methodology that has all the variables controlled will not be a useful number to compare hypnotherapists with. I would recommend instead assessing the hypnotherapist's quality of thought, the plan that they set up for your problem, assessing how much insight they have into your problem, rather than looking at oversimplified numbers. But just to answer the question a bit more directly, on a 2-week follow-up, among people who actually answer the phone, we ask about satisfaction. And at the 2-week follow-up, the satisfaction rate, every time I check it, it's in the high 80s. Please keep in mind that unless you're comparing the same follow-up process and the same methodology, that you can't compare two numbers. The other issue with success rate is that if I can compel my clients to do 50 sessions, the success rate's going to shoot way up. But because I can't compel clients to come in, some clients only do one session and try to measure success after an incomplete process. And whether or not those people are included in success rate calculations will affect the success rate as well. There are so many variables involved in measuring a success rate that it's too reductionistic, it's too simplistic to boil down success to one number. Instead, I would encourage you to look at yourself. It doesn't matter how successful I and my other clients have been when we work together. What matters is your likelihood of success. And that depends more on your determination. It depends more on your willingness and ability to change, your adaptability, your flexibility. It depends much more on you than it does on everybody else I've worked with. So this is the question at the back of everybody's mind when they call in. The thinking is that if hypnosis works for them, it's going to be worth the cost. If hypnosis doesn't work for them, then it's not worth the cost. But that's ignoring the fact that if the hypnotherapist is doing a good job and a thorough job, each session leaves them with insights they did not have before, perspectives they did not have before, and truths they might have neglected. It's ignoring the fact that in the session itself, they'll typically be very deeply relaxed. Typically, for a few hours to a few days afterward, they'll be more relaxed than usual and sleep better than usual. And this is the typical outcome of a hypnosis session. The question is coming from a place where the client is denying their own personal responsibility. If they take personal responsibility, that question won't even arise. Because the question they'll be asking instead is, how am I going to make this work for me? After opening my mind to new ideas and better ideas than the ideas I've had, after adopting these ideas in the session, how do I take this experience and apply it to my life and the world out there? Typically in a session, I would spend no more than the first 5 or 10 minutes talking about goals and progress. So that's just a dialogue. After that conversation, for about 45 or 50 minutes, the client will be in hypnosis. There'll be the induction to get you into hypnosis. It'll be the suggestions that fill out the outline discussed at the beginning of the session, and then emergence at the end. And the last 5 minutes are just a chance to discuss any thoughts or any questions that arose during the session. And then in each subsequent session, in the first 5 or 10 minutes, you'll discuss with me progress and any new goals that have arisen. Then I'll listen to your desired outcomes for the session. We'll outline a plan, and then again, there's the induction. I'll take the outline and expand upon it. Then there's emergence and discussion at the end. So each session follows that structure, but the actual content varies depending on the conversation in the first few minutes of each session. The question of how many sessions do you need comes up in the context of hypnotherapy a lot, but it doesn't come up as much in the context of, for example, massage therapy or psychotherapy, because people understand that there's only so much that the practitioner can do in 1 hour, and also that the practitioner is not the only influence on your mood or your life or your thoughts. Typically, I might see a client once every 1 to 2 weeks for a number of sessions. Typically, it's not more than about 5 sessions, but it does depend on how many issues I'm working with on the client. It depends on how big their goals are. It depends on how many challenges they're facing, and it depends on how suggestible they are. It's kind of like asking a massage therapist how many massages you need to be relaxed. Well, each massage is going to leave you feeling relaxed. Each massage is going to help you. But you could potentially be doing massages for the rest of your life. People do hypnotherapy because they see the benefit. They want the relaxation. They want the new perspectives. They want their mind opened to another person's insights into their life and their problems. Now, when it comes to specific goals, like quitting smoking or overcoming a fear, there is a threshold beyond which the client is satisfied. So, for example, for smoking, it's when they're done with cigarettes and they've had at least a few weeks as a non-smoker. For someone with a fear of public speaking, it might be that their fear is significantly reduced such that they have less or no anticipatory anxiety, and then when they're on stage, they're a lot more comfortable. When it comes to issues like weight loss, when it comes to issues like fears, I've seen so much variation in that one person might only need to lose 15 pounds and they already have good habits. They just need to stop snacking. Someone else might be emotionally eating and they're 50 pounds overweight, and they've tried everything else, and hypnotherapy is the last resort, which means they've already tried dieting, and they've already tried fasting, and they've already tried everything else, and that second person is going to require many more sessions than the first one. So how you measure success will determine how many sessions you do. Now, you are the only one who gets to decide how you spend your money. My job is to give you the best information I can about what I do and how I do it. But ultimately, the spending decisions that you make are your own decisions. So let's say you decide to proceed with hypnotherapy sessions with me, and you want to know how a set of sessions, how, for example, a program of 5 sessions might look. The analogy is that it's like we're building a structure. It's like we're building a house. The first session, we want to build it across the entire footprint of everything we might be covering over those sessions. So for example, for weight loss, we might cover emotional eating, we might cover snacking, we might cover food choice, healthy food choice, we might cover portion control, we might cover motivation for exercise. But because all of that is done in one session, we're only touching upon each point. Now sometimes you only have to hear a message once for it to click and for you not to have to hear the message again. And that's why we cover so much ground in a first session. In a second session, you'll provide feedback about what has stuck with you and what hasn't stuck with you. And what has stuck with you, we can just reinforce as the new normal, and then we focus on what hasn't stuck with you. So then we kind of build pillars. We'll do a deep dive, for example, into emotional eating. We'll do a deep dive into motivation for exercise. Over each session, we just build these pillars on top of that foundation that we laid out. And then, usually at some point, there is an end. Unlike many practices like psychotherapy and massage therapy, with hypnotherapy, people usually expect an end point. Then the final session is like we're building a roof over that structure, where once again we're covering all the ground, but because we're covering so much ground, we're only going a little bit into each specific topic. So a set of sessions would look like that. A few years ago, I changed the motto for this business to "We Make Hypnosis Make Sense." And the reason for it is because many people are making decisions about hypnosis based on misinformation. The misinformation often comes from television, from movies. There are different competing schools of thought even within the hypnotherapy profession. And one of my goals with this business is to make hypnosis make sense. That's why I've created this YouTube channel. And I believe that hypnotherapy does not have to be mystical. It does not have to be spiritual. It does not have to be something that's mysterious. Instead, hypnosis can make sense. It can be logical. It can fit with a rationalist, even skeptical worldview. And there's no reason for anyone to change their beliefs or take a leap of faith to do hypnotherapy. When you're choosing a hypnotherapist, you should be choosing someone who communicates well with you. So, for example, I know I drive away people who are looking for a more mystical approach to hypnotherapy, and they are better off in the hands of someone with more of a mystical approach. The kinds of clients who I tend to work with are professionals, managers, self-employed business owners, sales professionals, scientists, academics, and people who you might not think of as usually doing hypnotherapy. That's the group I tend to attract, and I believe it's because of my approach where I want to make hypnosis make sense. You have to choose someone who you can believe in, who you can trust, and who you can listen to for entire hours at a time. So these are some significant considerations. You should also choose someone who can give you new perspectives and new insights into your situation. So that wraps up the most common questions that people have when they're looking for a hypnotherapist. Based on all of this information, you are the only person who can make a decision for you about your spending, about your time, and about which hypnotherapist you want to work with. Once again, it's Luke Chow from the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis in Toronto, Canada. We make hypnosis make sense.